It's a show about memory. It's a show about family. It's a show about war. It's a show about the impact of the Holocaust. So it's a show that it's a show that can never show everything, but that's kind of why we wanted to do it. We wanted to do it because we wanted to show something.
Yes, my grandmother Polish, obviously. Krakow, that's where all his family from. But yes, and he was studying to be med school or something, or just about to go to med school. War broke out, 1939. And he kind of joined the Polish army, working in some kind of weird kind of technical division in the army at some point. Not certainly, I hadn't ever been in the army, but I think his medical background. It's quite a strange area, but calculating where the bombs were going to drop and stuff. So he'd go out into like no man's land, calculate positionings where things would drop, report it back. So quite a scientific, technical role. But anyway, so he ended up being caught by Joni. It ended up in a concentration camp. Yeah, so he was fighting on the western front of Poland, because Poland, at the time Poland was being invaded by Germany on the west front and then Russia on the east, and the whole German and Russian pact divided Poland. Yeah. So they were caught obviously in the middle of that. So he was in a camp for about a year, I think. Unfortunately I never met him, he died really young. So all the stories that I got are kind of relayed through my dad and by his family. But so he met loads of quite interesting people from all across Europe in prison, and learned 6 languages just in prison. So it's just really weird mix of people who were there. But then he actually escaped from that prison. Somehow made his way back into Poland, rejoined the army, and then started fighting against Russia on the eastern front, maybe like a year later or something, and then ended up getting caught by the Russians. He should have probably learned it the first time, but yes, after spending, I think it must have been like a year, 2 years in this camp in Germany, ended up in a Russian gulag, and it was sent out to basically Siberia, much further out. They were sending loads of people, so loads of Polish people that were fighting against Russia at the time. So this is before Russia kind of had this kind of alliance pact where they then started fighting against Germany. So it must have been like 41, maybe 42. And then as part of that pact, all the Polish officers that were caught were released. And they all went to Israel to train. Yeah. And then so that's where the Polish Free Army started. So then he properly trained to become like an officer in Israel. So he was in Israel for a while, became fluent in Hebrew. Yeah, in Hebrew, yeah. That was one of his languages, yeah. Yeah, it must have been. And then so from Israel they came back into Europe, into Italy. And that's when most of his time in action and fighting. And then worked their way up through Italy. And then by the time they got to northern Italy, the war was kind of finished. The kind of war was finishing. So just as the kind of Italians were surrendering, and it was all kind of winding down. And then ended up back in England. Ended up in England. Because essentially, by that point, Poland had been kind of totally taken over. It was becoming a communist state. And there was no way that anyone who fought in the army could ever go back to Poland. And it's quite sad because all the letters that his family wrote in England saying, never come back. Anybody who'd gone back would just been killed, which is really sad. So he never, in his lifetime, never got to go back, never got to meet his family again, which was quite, really sad. And ended up dying really young. He died in his early 50s. But he met my grandma, who was an Irish immigrant who had just come over from Limerick. And then so that must have been, spent about 20 years in England, I'd say. This quite a strange life with this Irish nurse and living in his family. But yeah, totally, 1 minute he's to be a medic, going to med school, and then 20 years later, you know, he's in England, he's having a completely different life from what he imagined. Yeah. But it's just quite interesting. All these stories have come through my dad, because I've never met him.
Yeah.
And my dad's, I think, a Polish trait generally is just very kind of reticent to tell kind of stories, or emotional stories. Everything's kind of very much in the past. So, like, the language was never passed like Polish down to my dad. Like, my dad never really kind of wanted to rediscover his roots, because his granddad, I think, just kind of shut it off and kind of left it in the past. I think it was just so painful to address all that stuff. So yeah, so it just ended up where my dad just kind of, he's obviously got loads of interesting things that he knows about his dad, but only certain bits and pieces have come down to me. Yeah. Which is, in a way, quite sad. That, you know, I'm really quite disconnected from our kind of Polish roots on that side, which, interestingly, we've now, over the last 5 years, like, really reconnecting with it. So we went out there a few years ago, we met everyone, all the Polish family came out here last year. So he's trying to reconnect with like his dad's family and his dad's cousins. And yeah, it's really nice. My dad went out to Warsaw a few months ago, met some more people, and just trying to discover this like family tree that's kind of gone across Europe, America. And yeah, it's better than nothing, I think, in some ways. But yeah, I'd love to know more about his life, like before the war, and the kind of stuff he got, you know, up to, which I'm sure my dad knows, but he just doesn't really want to express it. But yeah, this is quite mad stories about him being in two camps, either side of Poland, and just random things that happened to him, and the fact that he survived it. And it's, you know, it's an example of the war, of how 1 minute everything changes.
So, I think is it Leviticus? Is that the, yes, Leviticus. I think it's Leviticus 19:28. Says something like, do not cut your body for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourself. And I have a tattoo. It's Dartford. It says rag, which is a bit weird, but it actually stands for Raise and Give, and I got it while I was at university. I think I was doing some kind of fundraising. It's the only tattoo that I have, I promise, Mum. And but I've got lots of friends who are kind of totally covered in these amazing pictures and illustrations and doing it in memories of their loved ones and things like that. But,
my brother has like a whole sleeve of galaxies of exploding drums and metronomes, because he's a drummer. That's pretty cool.
would you ever get a tattoo, Joni?
Well, I've got like the ends of a temporary one, but I think that's the point, is that I could never have anything too permanent, because I always feel that things just change too quickly. I mean, things are always happening. Like, I mean, the only tattoo I've ever considered would be for my boyfriend of 5 years, but he broke up with me 3 weeks ago, so dodged a bullet there. I don't know, I think someone would almost have to die for me to get a tattoo.
It's funny because I remember the first time that I saw my great aunt Leia's tattoo. I used to think she's kind of my great aunt. I don't even know what the difference is, because she's not my grandma, but okay, so basically, he's got my dad, Abby, and then he's got one sister, Tila. So Tila married Moshe, and then it's Moshe's mum, Leia. So I don't know whether that counts, because I've got my two cousins, but I mean, obviously she's their grandma, but what is that in relation to me? Is it a great aunt? It is a great aunt. Brilliant.
I suppose it's just like a blood great aunt.
Yeah.
And it's just a lovely old woman in your life, basically.
So I was living in Israel. I was about 7 or 8 at the time, and we were sitting down for a kind of family dinner. And I remember because we were kind of sitting around. Where was I? I was sitting here, and she was sitting over here. And I remember she passed me this tray of potatoes, and suddenly I just saw this marking on her arm. It was just a set of numbers. It's weird because basically I couldn't tell you the actual numbers, but I remember it so vividly. And it transpires that she was actually in Auschwitz as a young woman, and she survived obviously, but suddenly you realise why, when you're living in such a hot country, somebody's always wearing an off-sleeve shirt.
It's funny because whenever I've talked about this show, the first question I often get, especially from Jewish people, is, "Are you Jewish?" And I never know what to say.
Well, you're not Jewish, Joni.
Okay, well, I'm not Jewish. I was raised Christian. I'm a bit agnostic at the moment. But yeah, I struggled with this because I worried that, I don't know, I didn't have a right to do this, that it wasn't okay, that I shouldn't be taking stories from Jewish history when I'm not Jewish. And I was rationalising this to myself, and I figured, no, I'm not Jewish, but I am a person. And 11 million, as far as we can tell, people were murdered by the Nazi guards. And so, I'm a person, they were people, and that's how I can relate to it. But even then, I was worrying about it. I even said to Dana, "Is this okay that I do this?" And she said,
"Shut up, Joni."
Exactly. But I worried because, I mean, you've got a personal connection to these stories. I mean, it's your family. It was your community in Israel. You've had the stories passed down. But I suppose I do have a personal connection with these stories because they've made such an impact on me as a person. And I just don't think that these stories can be left alone. They need to be told. Like, there was a story about this train. Most of the passengers were Jews, but a lot of them used to be able to call themselves German. There was 2,500 people on this train. They were sick, dying, and starving. When they did die, the guards just ran the bodies out. A lot of them had typhus. Covered in lice.
freedom. Wasn't there a bit before the show?
Yes, because they had to be transported from their ghetto, which was Bergen-Belsen, to the train to essentially be killed. These were the last few days of the war, so they were just going to die. And there was a family. There was a father, a mother, a daughter, and a daughter, 8-year-old daughter. And they collected all their possessions, because they still had some, because they thought that they were just going to another ghetto. They didn't realise they were being taken to die. And the mother sewed a bag for her daughter to be filled with, what's that word? Which is treasured things, which was a blanket, some photos, 3 Hebrew prayer books, and a book given to her brother on her bar mitzvah. And so this little girl, who was a bag of bones, was given this bag to carry. And all these people walked to the train. And her parents prayed that she wouldn't fall down, because if she did, she probably wouldn't get up.
Her father found this dictionary on the tracks. I think it was a Roman Hebrew dictionary. He kind of looked down at the dictionary and then looked back up at her.
And he said to her, I know you're tired and hungry, but we cannot leave Hebrew words on the track. So they put it in her bag, and she took it to the train, and they all survived. And later her mum gave her the book as a gift and wrote in it, remember that you took this to the train and you survived, and just to live life and enjoy it. But I suppose they can really leave the book there, because when you think about it, language transcends generations. When people die, the language continues, and the language contains the history of people. So when you think about it, how could they have left it?
Actually, my Saba, my granddad, Yanku, he died when I was 5 years old, and I don't have a lot of memories about him, but the memories that I do have, I would say, are very, very vivid. And I remember loving him very much. I loved him so much. And he had this cover, this hat. This is the hat that he gave to me, and I've had this now for 18, 19 years. The one thing that I really remember about him was, whenever we would have dinner and we would kind of sit around as a family, everyone would kind of be chatting and talking, but he would literally just sit and he would just concentrate on his plate in complete silence and just slowly eat his food out of kavod, out of respect for it. And my savda, she's my grandma, she told me this story about when they first arrived to Israel. They came from Romania, and they had to go this kind of really long route round, and they went from Romania to Hungary, then they had to go to Italy, and then from Italy they caught a boat to Israel. And my savda, my grandma, my dad, my auntie, they were all so so seasick, and they were just kind of completely flat out, not hungry, not interested. But my granddad bolts straight up to the guy in the canteen and says, manjana, manjana, telling him some food. So the guy says, well, how many? What do you want? And he says, bambino, bambino, I've got little kids, I've got to feed. So this guy stacks this plate full of sandwiches for him. And being my granddad, he took the plate, found a little place to sit, and had a quick little look around, and just sat and ate the entire plate of sandwiches to himself. I guess that's where I get my appetite from.
There was this other story that really made an impact on me because it just really made me think. So there was this woman, when she was a child, her mother always told her that her father had died in war, that he was a soldier. But, she was always curious, so she once asked her grandparents, because she saw all the other little boys and girls with their fathers, and she asked, why don't I have a father? And they told her,
Because he was hanged.
he was hanged? Why was he hanged?
Because the Nazis killed the Jews.
And she's really confused because the only Jew she knew was Jesus. And one day, she went to see Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. And it was then that she realised that her father was the bad guy in Schindler's List. And she was so angry because Steven Spielberg told her the truth. That her father was a monster and he was brutal. And he was the bad guy in Schindler's List. Because I suppose you don't think about bad guys having families. You think of them being alone without love, but they do have families. And they leave them behind. And she felt so guilty. Is guilt transferable? You sort of inherit guilt?
I know there's transgenerational grief, but I suppose it's probably the same with guilt. It's just what I don't understand is how could you feel guilty about it? None of those decisions that were made were yours, and you were barely even alive while it was happening.
But she felt so guilty. Because she hadn't had any pity for the sons and daughters of the other perpetrators. She had hated them. So maybe she started to hate herself. Maybe it was because her father wasn't there for her to hate. Maybe it was because he'd never shown any remorse. But she was left with all the guilt, with none of the possibility to say sorry. One day when she was a little girl, she asked her mum, why didn't you marry Oscar Schindler instead? Because she knew him as a child and he was very friendly to her. And her mum said, well, if I had, you would leave him. I suppose that's when she realised that no matter what, she was her father's daughter.